Welcome to the launch of the tip sheet for supporting criminalised women. My name is Nina and I'm a lived experience survivor of incarceration and violence. And I'm also the Family Violence Justice Project worker for Flat Out. I'm deeply honoured and touched by the apparent dedication and curiosity in resisting systemic collusion and how to better support folks who have been criminalised. It's really moved me and hope that today it ignites you with passion within you to be creative in your solutions, to think outside the box, and to provide respectful, caring support to the most vulnerable members of our community. We are agents of change, and no longer will I other the system that harmed and abused me, as I've regained my power and my strength. My voice will not be silenced and my experience will not be shamed. I'm part of the system and I will be accountable to the harm it causes by calling it out and empowering others to change it. Are you with me? Yeah. And I'll get Elder Perry Wandon to come up.
Good morning, everybody.
Comfortable.
It's rather scenario. Good morning, everybody. Yes, my name's Perry Wandon, Wurrung, and yeah, you're welcome. It's good to see smiling faces. I can understand what drama and everything is going through. Yeah, I myself's got my youngest blokes in, well, wherever he is. But firstly, I'd like to acknowledge all my ancestors, elders, both past, present, and of course, the next emerging generation, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are here today. And look, with this, it's always good to hear who's behind what, to see the faces and then find out exactly how things are, because you do hear little bits and pieces. I know myself with the children that I've had where the mums are going their way, I've gone my way. And then you try to reconnect, and then of course there's always trouble. But in some cases it can be violence. All right, so that's when youth people step in and hopefully can sort of redirect the women in the right way of life. That's not for me to judge. That's your business. So I give you all that okay. But it's been happening for thousands of years. We know. With one of my members of the family, when they left Corrandirk, they went down to Lake Tyers. 13 sort of, bang, 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 one after another. And that one part of the family's had 5 deaths in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's sad to go and see them because we're reconnecting with each other, because I try to get down as much as I can to see my family, and they don't know, we didn't know who was who. And then to get down there, it's just a reconnection, which is so, and we just last week, Uncle Nicky Moffat down there at Gunai. So he was a good brother of mine. We got to know each other over the last 5 years, where if he was going anywhere, he'd come and stay at my place, and vice versa if I was going down there. So it does, and he got me to meet a lot of my family who I did not know, and especially with throwing out the names. And it's all connection. And it's basically, if anyone can help anyone, that's what everyone can do. As I said, I live in Hillsville, so my family's never moved. We've virtually taken all our mob was taken all the way around in Wurrung country, and hey, you got to stay there. So from 1863 to 1924, that's where everyone stayed. And from 35 men, women, children early to 424. But don't forget, that was all the other mobs that were roaming in to try and get work or to find better living. Sorry, out you go. So it's yeah, and it still is today. How many people do you see saying, oh, hang on, I'll go and put that Aboriginal shirt on, like all the colours, wear the colours. And a lot of people look at you, downgrade you. I went last night just to pick up a tub for my partner's ute. And when I said I was Aboriginal, he just said, oh yeah, I just put on an Aboriginal apprentice. And I said, whoa, That blew me away. So there was connection just already. And he's a Murray from Queensland. But just that some people, how they get straight on board, and other people just sort of look you up and down and go, right. So I can sit on both sides of the fence. Most of my family have got some dark skin, and I myself took after my mother, very light. So I sit there and I just listen to the crap that comes out of some of these people's mouths, and they wonder why trouble happens. So I just sit there and I just go, right. I walk over to them and I say, hey, you know what you just said? I can get you the sack for that, especially on the construction site. And they look at you and they go, what? What's it got to do with you? And I said, that's my family. And sort of take a step back and you say, no, I'm Aboriginal. You don't look at it. And I said, well, look, that's another story. I said, you cannot say what you're saying there. They just had one last week. My cousin went out to do a cultural heritage induction. Winslow. They've got a bad reputation in being racist. She comes screaming back into the office crying. There was almost, my uncle almost went out there, was going, yeah, he's going to go hell for leather on these blokes. But it's been kept very silent, so we don't know what's happening. I'll find out next week at the board meeting, because I'm on the board of directors as well. But look, today, enough of that. This is your day. I hope everything goes well, and I hope you get a couple more steps forward. Oh, don't forget too, if you want to write a letter to Wurundjeri, get a bit of support, because we got millions. It's just a matter of what we're doing with our cultural money, because that's the thing that's our backbone. Anything that's happening out in the western suburbs, eastern development, that's where the money comes in. And I'm sure if you write a letter and say, could you please support in some manner? Thank you. And look, you can only try, can't you? Yeah, I'll even mention next week at the board meeting. I'll try and write it in my notes. But anyway, hope you have a great day. Look, Womajanka, welcome. Yumi Kunibik, Wurundjeri Wurrung, meaning welcome to the land of Wurundjeri people. And I do welcome you. Hope you have a great day. By the time you finish today, keep those smiling faces up and keep the coffee in, and see if you can find some spoons. It's pretty bad. You've got some. All right. Thank you.
Someone getting onto those spoons? Great. Spoons are there now, Perry. Forgot to mention as well, toilets to the right, left. But if you could please use the balcony door to make sure that you don't disrupt the speakers, that would be great. Thanks for coming out, Perry. I think it's really important that we do acknowledgements for country, but I think it's even more of value if we get a welcome to country, and like Perry already mentioned, like it funds so much for those folks. So really encourage people to get welcome to country rather than just doing acknowledgement. I would like to also take a moment to acknowledge my privilege to be able to advocate and support in a safe and supported environment. Because as we know, the streets are home to many different advocates protesting political and personal issues across a vast range of experiences and communities. And this poses a really high risk for them for police brutality, criminalisation and incarceration. And I would like to acknowledge those many silent stories, the narratives and the unheard voices that are not with us today. I would like to also acknowledge the fierce folks who have gone before me and unapologetically have been sharing their lived experience of incarceration that has helped me to lift my shame and the power that I stand in today. Big shout out to Debbie Kilroy and Auntie Vicky Roach, whose footsteps that I have walked in and have really supported me throughout my work. I would also like to note before we get started, there are thousands of people across our country locked up in cells right now. 819 children as young as 10 years old, 315 of those women in Victoria, 158 of those women are unsentenced, and we call ourselves a progressive country. 89% of those women have experienced sexual abuse and continue to be sexually abused at the hands of the state while in prison. We must end strip searches. Sexually abused before and after receiving visits from their children, family and friends. So women will often choose not to have visits with their children to safeguard themselves from sexual abuse. If you're sitting here right now in the audience, and sorry, this isn't available to the people online, and you're disgusted and confused as to why we're condoning strip searches, please take action. I've left little postcards on every seat where you can fill out your details and send it to the Minister of Corrections. If you don't want to do that, just leave it on the table and I'll post it for you. All right, and I'll get Leslie, Ray, and Yas to come up, please. Hello. Oh. Down here. Also, if you've got questions throughout the discussions, if you could send those questions. Is there a slide for the phone number? Or is it already up there? Okay. And can we change that slide though, okay? There we go, that phone number up the top in the purple circle.
0466 441 255. Please use it. Send us your questions because it's really good feedback. It helps us to calibrate trainings as well. And if we get time to answer some at the end, we will. So yeah.
Great, thanks. Well, do you want to introduce yourself, Leslie, a little bit and just talk about what the work is that you do?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Leslie Zambrano. I am originally from Colombia, from specifically the Cunas land in Urabá. And here in Australia, I live in and work in Burunjari country's land. And I want to acknowledge that this land has never been ceded. I am a secondary sector here in Australia, and I recognize that I benefited from the colonization that still impact the life of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and any Aboriginal people who are here today. Talking about me a little bit, I have been working for 20 years in the non-profit organizations here in Australia and also overseas. We people who has been abused, sexual, and have experienced sexual violence and also family violence. And I am very honored to be here today, speaking with amazing women and people in the space. I work currently as the Access and Inclusion Advisor at Safe and Equal. And for those who don't know what Safe and Equal do, we are the big body for services that work with victim survivors of family violence. We work from prevention to response and also, to have programs, advocacy. We do advocacy, capacity building, and also are working very strongly to embed lived experience in our organization, but also in the sector, in the family violence sector. That's me.
Thanks, Leslie. And I hope you don't mind me saying that normally you don't do any public speaking. You were feeling quite nervous. But I think, it's important too to know that we have this expectation for lived experience to come up and tell their stories. And I really appreciate you coming along and accepting my invite and standing in solidarity with me today.
Hey everyone, I'm Yasmin. I worked at Flat Out for 18 months. I was a program support worker and then manned the intake and did intake with everyone coming to be supported at Flat Out. My life was not fantastic. I was abused as a kid by my mum and had kids young, 16, 17 and 22, I think. I ended up with a severely violent partner. He nearly killed me on several occasions. He kidnapped my daughter when she was 18 months old, and that resulted in me being heavily addicted to ice and heroin, homeless, and then obviously committing crime and getting in trouble with the cops and ending up in jail. DHS were no help. He was a master manipulator. I'd lose my shit because of something he said. I was clean and he'd tell DHS I was still using, and they believe him because he was cool, calm and collected, and I was this erratic psycho woman. I didn't see my daughter for 3 years, and it broke me. I ended up getting clean after getting out of jail, and he lost our daughter to child protection several times. And the only reason I got her back was the very last day of court, and he threatened me and my support worker and my grandmother outside of court. And because I had my support worker there as a witness, we went straight into the police station, did a statement, and the very next week she was back in my court. I studied my cert for community services, and that was very uncomfortable because of my lived experience and, trying to figure out how much I wanted to share or not share. Everybody that I was studying with was fantastic. I struggled to find work placement because of my criminal record. And one of my teachers, she was fabulous, and she'd heard about Flat Out. And I called and spoke with our old EO, Elisa, and just spilled my whole life story to her, and she was great. And I started work placement there a couple of weeks later, and it was just everybody at Flat Out was so amazing. Never expected me to share anything unless I wanted to, which was super empowering. And I remember, I think it was my first week of work placement, and Elisa had already offered me a job. So when I was finished my studies, and I said to her, yeah, that'd be great. I said, but I don't want anything with a peer role. I don't want a peer role attached to my name or a lived experience or anything like that, because you're looked at differently. When you talk to other service providers, the minute you say kind of you're a peer worker or whatever, you kind of get the feeling from them that you're not as important. What your work doesn't hold as much weight. So Elisa was fantastic, and well, I suppose everyone at Flat Out was fantastic. And I was they made a whole new role for me, program support worker, and it was fantastic. I'm not working at Flat Out anymore, but I'm working with horses, and it's fantastic. So awesome.
Hi everyone, my name is Ray. I worked at Flat Out for I think 4 years, and I'm still, I guess, involved as a friend of Flat Out, and doing some supervision and mentorship. One of the things that I did was seed this resource with Yaz, and also have been able to hand over the project to Nina. I worked on that project and laid its foundation, and it's, I think what Yaz was just saying about peer workers being looked down on, this work and this project is a testament to the fact that lived expertise, when treated with dignity and professionalised and centred, it makes the work better The project is better because I've handed it over to Nina. This resource took my work that I had already done in the role and made it so much better. It wouldn't be this, and it wouldn't be as useful. It wouldn't be as accessible. You know, the content that's in here, it could be a PhD, but instead it's told through, you know, personal wisdom and story in a way that, you know, it makes it so much richer and so much more human and so much easier to absorb. And at the end of the day, I don't think anybody should ever be written about someone if that person couldn't pick it up and not feel demeaned by that material and be able to understand it and be able to apply it. And that's what centering lived expertise does. But yeah, we also shouldn't pigeonhole these workers and these advocates and activists. They're the core of the work that we do. And I think the sector could really still use, you know, some more practices of getting out of the way. So yeah, I hope that today and this resource will inspire you to get out of the way and make space for this wisdom and practice knowledge. It's just so important. So yeah, it's great.
Leslie, could you talk a little bit about the relationship that Safe and Equal had with developing the resource of why it's important for peak bodies to have partnerships with grassroots orgs?
As, as Ray was saying, the voices of people with lived experience are fundamental in shaping the service that we need to and aspire to respond to the needs of the victim survivors, but especially we recognize as Safe and Equal that there are victim survivors that experience intersecting levels of oppression. And for that, we need to work as a peak. We organizations that are working with lived experience and are working and advocating for the rights of communities who have been experiencing that kind of levels of oppression and systemic harm too. So for this resource, we have a chance when we were funded to work in our webpage, and we thought that that was a good opportunity for us to center the voices of lived experience, and also we approach different organizations, grassroots community organizations, also some ACOs, which is Aboriginal community organizations, to develop some resources that we could put in a page that now is called Tailored and Inclusive Support. And in that way, we wanted to motivate our practitioners and our organizations to start centering the voices of the groups that are generally not heard in our sector, and that are the ones who, I guess, need more, support from the services. And we know as well and recognize that they has been experiencing some barriers in accessing services. So yes, so it was like an opportunity for us to do that, to walk the talk and engage the expertise, the knowledge, and the voices that we needed to hear in the service. I think that you can see, as Ray said, you can see the results. And I think that when you read, if you haven't had the chance, the resource, there is a poster. There is also, I got to know today, some videos that has been developed. So you will see how strongly the voices of victim survivors come here and tell every practitioner out there that there is the need to challenge the ways that we do things and to take in consideration in the service that we provide what the victim survivors are telling us. They help us to shape the best service possible, and we need to engage with that expertise and with that knowledge. I answered.
Yeah, absolutely, that's great. And I think too, it's important to note too that like, with now lived experience being so far embedded in the voices heard of people who have experienced violence, more and more communities are coming out and saying that police are unsafe, that there's no justice in our justice system, and to really start having, I think the first question that you should ask anyone that you're supporting is police safe for you? And then, you can work on and make alternatives to policing. And yeah, I think it's just important to note that. Also, Yaz, why do you think it was important to embed lived experience in the resource?
Shit. I think, well, I suppose it was like all the meetings we'd have at when I was working at Flat Out and
Imagery, go on.
Language, it was around language.
it was around language. Yeah, I think from the minute I started at Flat Out, I always kind of touched on my lived experience and used that to, some of the other workers would be stuck in a situation where they weren't really sure how they should approach a situation or how to help fix something, not fix, you know what I mean? And so I'd always kind of touch on my lived experience, and it was funny, the meetings, and Ray, especially Ray, would use all these huge technical words that I had no idea what the hell she was talking about. And I'd sit there in the private chat to, 80 or Dazzler or someone else, and what the fuck is she talking about? I don't understand any of these words she's saying. And so they'd be sitting there explaining it to me, and it got to the point where 80 and a couple of other people were like, you know what, Yaz, just fucking say something to her. Just bring it up and go, hey, what do you mean? Explain it to me, but like not in big words, explain it to me. And so I kind of put Ray on the spot, and Ray,
that was the best thing.
Ray, it kind of stumped her a little bit, and she was like, oh shit, how do I actually explain these words? And yeah, it was, and then yeah, this kind of happened. So I kept asking questions, and I kept going, right, well, maybe we can say it like this so everyone understands. And that was, and I don't have a huge academic background. I dropped out of school in year 8. My nan was always, your speech is important and your pronunciation is important and this and that and la-di-da. But that's not me. I am who I am, and I'll speak the way I speak. I don't give a shit. And yeah, so I think it was, really important that, even when I was being supported by a support worker, she would speak to me as just a person and would explain things to me in a way that were easy to understand. And I think that made the working relationship better. I knew what she meant. There was no confusion. There was no misunderstanding. There was no, okay, she said this to me, but actually I really don't know what she means. So yeah, I think that was really important. And yeah, I was super like, oh God, I don't want to ask these questions because how embarrassing. But it's not, and it shouldn't be. And, we should just talk, and, you don't know who you're talking to. So to use all these words that a person might not necessarily understand, it makes them feel like shit. Yeah, I had epic time doing this, and yeah, putting Ray on the spot, that was good fun.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say that what Yaz has charmingly related as a hilarious anecdote is actually really cutting to the core of so much that's wrong with the system and the way the system colludes. And I will be forever grateful that you had the balls to do that, and for the conversations that led to this work. yeah, you know, there's nothing wrong with the way that you speak and something profoundly wrong with a system that holds your voice as less than when it should be at the fore. And literally anything we can do to disrupt that is just so vital, and so much more than just, you know, making language accessible. It's actually fundamentally about class and access and dignity and respect and accountability. So yeah, thanks, mate. You're welcome.
I just think like when you ask me, you know, why the importance of us as a safe and equal to work, you know, with grassroots organization is because they are close and know and listen to permanently, you know, on a permanently basis, what the victim survivors are saying. And if we wanted to do this work by ourselves, we were just not having that kind of level of access and also the truth that they speak as is spoken in this resource. So that is the benefit. And we are very grateful that Flat Out allowed us to work in partnership with them in developing this. And also listening to you now, you know, what it means as well for victim survivors to see their voices there, center, and focus on informing good practice in the sector.
Yeah, absolutely well said. You know, give a huge shout out to Flat Out, even though I work there, but that's allowed. Because they are the criminalised community, although a lot of them haven't been criminalised themselves, they really do belong to the criminalised community. And I know too that, like, you know, since being employed there, I've really shifted my imposter syndrome. When I'm doing advocacy work, it's been really hard for me to see myself as a professional and not the piece of shit that I always was told that I was. So at Flat Out, I feel like I've really been loved back to life and like been regained my power and see myself as somewhat of a professional. Also, Ray, could you explain the systemic collusion and the power and control wheel that you see up here in the circle?
Oh, I could go on, but that's okay. We really could. It'd be a lot of syllables, it'd be lengthy. So yeah, in a nutshell, the sort of, I guess, base of the resource and what I had originally done with the first practitioner resource that Yaz questioned and then led to this was all around the intersection of systemic harm, systemic abuse, and then systemic collusion. So systemic harms are obviously the harms that people experience as a result of the system, like being locked up. Systemic abuse is when someone leverages the system against someone they're trying to harm. So that's your ex calling the cops, telling them that you're not clean, you know, all of these things, like using that system as a weapon, as a form of harm. And then systemic collusion is when individuals and organisations either directly or indirectly compound those harms by refusing to see them, you know. And we look at the way the increasingly carceral system has developed things like information sharing, which is not centred and designed around the lived experience of particularly of people who experience a lot of systemic harm and abuse, and actually ends up compounding and creating further harms. So the sort of central point of this resource is to support workers and make them feel, I guess, equipped and hopefully inspired to stand up and be accountable for the ways in which the system is harmful and the ways in which the system reproduces the power and control mechanisms that someone experiences in a violent relationship. You know, it says to them, you know, gaslights them and undermines them and takes their power away, you know. And so I think also, you know, I work as a supervisor and I work with a lot of early career frontline workers largely in the family violence space. And something that's incredibly apparent to me is that people are coming in and they're burning out in a year or two. You know, I'm speaking to them at a point when they're supposed to be full of enthusiasm and fed by the work and nourished and excited and motivated. And instead they're heartbroken and burning out. And I think so much of it has to do with the ways in which we're forced to collude. And you sit in a room going, I'm supposed to be with this person. I'm supposed to be allied with this person. And instead, I'm allied with the system against them. And I'm having to sit here with a mental checklist of, have I done this? Have I ticked this off? How's this going to fit in ship? What about this? Do I have to make a mandatory report? Instead of being allied with the person sitting in front of you. So, you know, part of that work is recognizing that it's happening, having language for addressing it, being able to build solidarity with the people you're supporting and within your workplace, being able to, you know, I think language can help us advocate. It can help us go back to our funders and go back to our peak bodies and saying, you are forcing us to collude and we refuse. This is not why we got into the work. It's not in the spirit and the history of the family violence sector. You know, we started in the streets, we started in lounge rooms, we started alongside and with, and now we sit across the other side of these desks with all of these regulations and these constant reforms. Anyway, I hope that this work will be a light of accountability, of solidarity, of possibility. And, you know, it's not ever a point that we arrive at where we've decolonized our practice or we're not colluding anymore. But what we can learn to do is recognize and resist, and to say to the people that we work for, I see you and I see this and it's not okay. And in whatever way I can stand alongside you and recognize and resist those harms and be accountable when I inadvertently compound them and, you know, take responsibility for that, then I will. So, yeah.
Sad. Can we also thank Leslie for coming out today, and then I'll get the other panelists to jump on. All right, legends. Leanne, Jackie, Rio.
Yeah, I've been told I'm not ever.
And we have Jazz too, who's just ducked out for a second. Up there. I thought you were up the front.
I'm sorry.
This is our legendary supersized panel. So I guess I just want to start off too by saying that in my experience, like I was the expert of my experience when I was going through domestic violence, and I had very carefully, meticulously, with a fine-tooth comb, constructed this really great risk management strategy. And, you know, although that I wasn't safe, I had recognised the signs in order to make myself safer. And it wasn't until I reached out to services and asked for help that risk management strategy was completely disrupted and ripped from underneath me. And nowhere at any point of that time did anyone consider what I had been doing to keep myself safe. It was very directed, and obviously, you know, with not having my own control or the person that was using violence, them also using control, the violence extremely escalated, and then so did my drug use, and, you know, child protection became involved, and it was just like this ongoing engagement where, like, I felt like I was a target. I was constantly having to prove my innocence. All the support that I was meant to be receiving was compliance-based or conditional-based. So it was like, unless you do this, you're not going to get this. And with the amount of different organisations that I was supposed to be linked in with, in the utmost heightened of my crisis, there was no way that I could have managed any of those things. So, you know, I think it's just really important to note, because I was so fearful, and so, like, I just started self-policing all of my interactions, whether it was in front of services or going to the shop, because, like, I had ingrained that, like, how I behaved or what I said had really violent repercussions on me from the service and from the system. And yeah, and I just started to take that on as my truth. And I feel like, you know, I'm one of these people that say, like, you never do ifs and buts because it never fucking happens. So don't do what if. But I have Like it took me 6 years to leave person, like to completely have them out of my life. So using violence against me with 6 years of IBOs and child protection and children's court and all sorts of services that were involved. And I can't help but think that had I have done it without the intervention of cops, it would have been a lot shorter. A lot shorter, a lot less painful. I wouldn't have ended up incarcerated. Yeah, just want to sort of put that out there because I know that I'm asking the question, but I just want to say my bit too. So I guess we'll go around and just do the same as what we did before. So, introduce yourselves. Does anyone want to be brave and put their hand up? Yes, Jackie.
Not really. What am I doing? Just introduce myself.
Yeah, just introduce yourself, however you would like to.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, I'm Jackie. I've worked with Nina before in the social group and we're friends. I'm a woman who's been, I was awarded state, then I went through imprisonment, drug use, domestic violence, then had children myself, who then had to deal with the department again on various occasions, including 2 days ago. So yeah, so it's sort of timely. Even though I've been clean for a really long time, and even if I wasn't, it's not the point. My daughter's really well looked after. She goes and they just come in and always threatening to, if I don't do this, we're going to take her. And now she's 10. And it stresses her out, and then they want to go to school and interview her, and even the principal's saying like, this kid's fine, like don't come and upset her, like she's got anxiety. And it's all just because I was awarded the state, and 12 years ago I was in prison. Like, oh, excuse my language, but I'll pass on and I can come back to all that later.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we're meeting on today, the land of the Wurundjeri, and acknowledge the elders past, present, and yes, the emerging ones, of all races that are here today, and acknowledge that sovereignty is never ceded. I also sit here as a very privileged woman, simply because I wasn't removed from my mum. Only because we hid around, brought up in the bush, because I was paper bag, my colour skin was paper bag brown, and that was the best people, best Aboriginal people to assimilate into the society. We will make them white soon, so mum and dad were seasonal workers, kept us out in the bush simply because they didn't want us to be taken. My level of schooling is 1 week in high school, 2 weeks in grade 4, 1 week in kindergarten. So that's the little times when we did stay in a town. But it's quite, and that's the reason why I say I'm very privileged, because I'm supporting so many people nowadays, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, with the work that I do for GMAR Victoria, which is Grandmothers Against Removal. Yeah. So we go through hell as per anybody would, dealing with a system like the so-called child removers. I don't see them as protecting our children, so I call them child removers. We will work collaboratively beside them to help our mob, or help our parents. We do work really hard with our women that are in prison, because we fear the death in custody. We really fear that. But when you get, oh well, where do you work for? What do you do? Is your organisation incorporated? We don't have to talk to you. So there's little old lady welfare worker with purple hair. Now I've actually got, sorry, my phone's mucking up again. I don't know how to turn it off. My technicians are all at home, my kids, 9-year-olds. But yeah, that's what we do. GMAR in Victoria started in 2018 with the community was saying, that we need to address the high rate of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. And some of those children were actually taken just because mum done a stint in jail. She would have done it when the kids weren't born. They still used that against her. So that's the system we fight. This system is not working. It's broken when you look at the number of people that are incarcerated as opposed to the number of people that are not, and yet they're making these policies. So who sits with that person who's making those policies? Is it a person with lived experience of being in prison? Is it a person of lived experience having their child removed? Is it a person of Aboriginal descent? You know, it's making all these rules. So we've learned a lot since 2018, only because there's a GMAR in New South Wales. But what they work very differently to what we do. We work on the ground with the parents. We even do supervision so that mum and dad or grandmother are not missing out on access with their children. But I'll tell you what, when that mob, the child removers, want to put a wall up, they'll put a huge wall up, especially when we haven't got any tools to break it down. But we have now. We've got strong people. We've got strong allies, you know, working with us. But I actually want to acknowledge Flat Out, because I met workers from Flat Out when I organised a rally down outside the library for one of our mums who died in custody, young Heather Calgarrett. So we don't only do like, you know, work with the department, we work with the whole of the communities, whoever needs us. And so I said, well, let's have a rally. This is wrong. I'm not going to sit in and let them think that it's gone unnoticed, you know. So let's have it. And the families, you know, from Western Australia, they didn't know what to do. I ran with it, and I met workers from Flat Out down there, and I felt so at ease knowing that they're a bit like GMAR. They go in and they support, you know, their clients, or they have their lived experiences to support. But yeah, and just all this experience also adds to me feeling privileged, because I now can fight the fight for our children, for our women, you know, and I'll probably do it for the dads too, but too many mums are being blamed for being victims of domestic violence. You even have to talk stupid to the department and say, wait a minute, she didn't slap herself in the face. Why are you taking the children off her? You have to talk stupid to them like that. Then even I could sit there and say, you know what, common sense is not as common as it should be here in this world. And they actually acknowledge it. And we've noticed too, when you get something positive happening with the department, regardless of where it is, it's because of a good understanding worker. Why can't they all be good understanding workers? You know, why do they have to be well, you know, I don't want to swear. You know, they're non-judgmental. We have workers that are non-judgmental, you know. I don't know whether the black fella thing or not, but I'm walking along and then the police come with the door. I think, oh, what have I done? So there's that inherent feeling. And then when we try and I sit down and talk to the child removers, and I'll say, well, you know, you're saying that if you don't do all these orders, you're going to keep her child, which has been happening. And they go, no, she's got to do that because, you know, she was the one who got herself in prison. Well, no, the system did. You know, the system did. That's the system that you okay. But it's sad, but it's reality. So I'd like to see that where do we go to from today? Where do we go back to our jobs and just say, oh, well, that was a good meeting? Or do we start actions? You know, any kind of meeting that I go to, especially like this one, I take it back to people, to staff members, to community members, to anybody that, it may, I guess, help. Because it's good information sharing. It's good to know that we have, GMA. It's good to know that we have Flat Out. It's good to know that we have some of your services, you know? And I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, I'm just me. Because if you weren't, if you was just, you wouldn't be here today, being your proud self. No matter what you do, you know, that's you yourself. I mean, I could say I'm a very proud woman, from New South Wales, Queensland, living in Victoria, up the country. And, sometimes I feel, oh, but I'm only me, but then that goes, I talk to myself, no, that you've got a lot of things behind you. So we need to respect ourselves and have confidence in ourselves. And then you'll see that big, how do I put it? Big light shining from you. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Leanne. I guess I call myself a lived experience advocate, and I don't necessarily specialize in any one particular lived experience. I experienced childhood abuse, which led to youth homelessness, which led to mental illness, leading to self-medicating, which led to substance use, which led to, well, a whole lot of things. And then, you know, committing crimes, being incarcerated, and all of those really pointy systems that honestly do not work at all. I had to get churned through them. So that is always super fun. And I guess, everyone on the panel knows that this is this massive systemic problem. And I suppose, you know, everyone watching today in the audience online also understands that there is this issue, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. You know, I guess just like everyone here, I really use my experience, and I consider myself lucky because even though being churned through the system, I was very lucky to be caught at my absolute worst in crisis by Task Force Community Agency. And they are the only organisation that got it right. The only one that I have gone through that actually got it right. And I know that if I did not have them supporting me when I had literally no one, kid was taken away, I had no family support, no friend support. If it wasn't for Task Force, I would not be here today, physically speaking to you in this room, but I probably also wouldn't be alive, because no one can make it through that kind of crisis alone, because they just don't end up living. When, you know, and that is the sad reality. And I do acknowledge that there are a lot of women that we don't even know about that never made it out. And I think that is a big reason why we need to focus on the bigger picture, like the bigger system, and how all the systems intersect and how they collude and how they systemically disadvantage already like hurting women in crisis who are usually misidentified as perpetrators, who have all of these underlying issues, who need support, not punishment. And I guess that is a big passion of mine. You know, I advocate wherever I can. I take up any speaking gigs, no matter how big or small, because I know that I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can do it. And I don't just speak for me, because I'm okay now, but there are a lot of women that aren't. And there are a lot of women that will continue not to be okay, and that will continue into generational trauma if we don't start doing something about it now.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Barzani. I just wanted to start off by, you know, centering the fact that we are on Aboriginal land, and that, you know, we are in a building that is occupying unceded Wurundjeri country today. And that, you know, in all of our conversations and our struggles and in our resistance that if we're not centering Aboriginal sovereignty, then there's basically no point to what we're doing. And I think that, you know, questions of sovereignty, land back, decolonizing, abolition really need to be at the center of all of the practices that we're talking about today, like all of this stuff, you know. I think beneath it all is that, and I think that that is really important for people to have as their framework moving forward with anyone in like services that work with people who are criminalized. I am a Kurdish woman from Rojhelat. Rojhelat is northwest Iran, which is eastern Kurdistan. I came to this country when I was 2 years old. Yeah, I think in our conversations of colonization and criminalization, we also need to remember that, right now as we speak, 1,800 people are still in detention centers across this country. That includes people who have, just fled from their countries due to colonization, from Australia, invasion. And we need to also remember, the people who are in community detention, not just in detention centers per se, but this includes children. And to remember, and never forget Manus, Nauru, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, all of these sites of incarceration where, people's lives have been destroyed, and talking about intergenerational trauma as well. Aboriginal people experience intergenerational trauma. A lot of us who've experienced colonization, Kurds, Palestinians. And I think for that reason, I feel that, my struggle as a Kurdish woman is like inherently tied to sovereignty, Aboriginal sovereignty in this land, and that it's basically one and the same, and that my liberation can't come without the liberation of Aboriginal people. And that is like at the bottom of that is abolition and getting rid of the carceral institutions and structures and getting rid of police, basically. And yeah, I met Nina through the Homes Not Prisons campaign. I did an internship with Flat Out through that, for my university degree. And yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate sharing the panel with all of you folk. And yeah, that's all.
Thanks, everyone. I just would like to echo that, I'm standing up here with a bunch of absolute legends. Yeah, that was really moving. I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about systemic collusion and like the barriers that we have faced, or that people that have faced, or people that that have that you've supported have faced. You want to kick it off,
So I'll just touch on a situation from myself. I was working with an amazing woman at Launch Housing. She was just phenomenal, a phenomenal worker, phenomenal person, not judgmental at all. She was fantastic. She worked with me not long after I got out of jail. So I was on a CCO, 18-month CCO. I was on a curfew, wasn't allowed to do drugs, wasn't allowed to drink, wasn't allowed to do this, wasn't allowed to do that. She came to my house one day and I just used a massive whack of ice. It was off my face. It's great. She knew full well what I was doing. She, part of her job, she was supposed to, report that to my CCO worker and say, hey, Yasmin used today. They would have obviously breached me and done whatever they wanted to do and all of that. And remember I said, yeah, so you're going to tell the cops, aren't you? And she's like, no, I don't give a shit. You hurting anyone? I said, no. Okay, well, that's what you want to do, by all means, like, it's your life. And I'm not here to get you in more trouble. I'm here to support you. I'm here to support your housing. I'm here to support your mental health. I'm here to support you and what you want to do. And that was the first time I ever had a worker be on my side. And yeah, after that, I think I trusted her with absolutely anything because she did not collude with the people who were trying to control me and you know, basically tell me what I can and can't do. And, you know, had they have found out all the work I'd made on trying to get my kids back and get clean and all of that, it would have gone straight out the window. Very highly likely would have ended up back in jail, had she told my CCO. And she didn't. So that was, yeah, my first kind of, you know, not all workers are bad. A lot are, in my experience and in the experience of a lot of people I've supported while working at Flat Out, a lot of people I knew on the streets. You know, we wouldn't trust workers. We'd have the street workers come and see us on the streets, and you'd be too scared to tell them anything because you just didn't know who they were going to tell if, you know, 10 minutes after they left, if the cops turned up because we had, you know, some heroin or ice on us or whatever. So they're there to support the street people, but we're too scared to tell them anything because we just don't know where that information is going to go. So the support is not there, which is really unfortunate because, I mean, when you're on the streets, you know, you're up all night, you sleep most of the day because it's safer. And so you can't go to your appointments. So these street workers that come overnight time, it's our only real opportunity to kind of speak to them and you know, get some stuff happening. But when you don't trust the services because of the collusion and the mandatory reporting and all of that, I mean, how are we supposed to get it in report?
Yeah, I just want to add to that quickly. I think that drug use is still so heavily discriminated and stigmatized. I also work for DHS as the Victim Survivors Advisory Council, so I have no shame in calling it out. But when they list their marginalised communities, they list multicultural, LGBTIQ, the elderly, the young, the Aboriginal, the criminalised, no mention of drugs and alcohol. And I think that, you know, that's got a lot to say in itself. I've had a similar experience as well. And I think that, like, you know, I think for me, there's a real difference in a recreational user and an addict. And in my opinion, and I've seen this not only in my own experience, but in the experience of others, the difference is the trauma. Like, I was a recreational user, and it wasn't until I experienced heavy trauma that I decided to self-medicate. And it wasn't seen as you know, it just gets seen as a criminal punishment, not as a health matter or like as medication. And, you know, I obviously got clean and that was with love and support and kindness and understanding and, you know, opportunities to lead and flourish your life. Without those opportunities, I would have continued to be in my addiction because I don't have a lot of kids to be nuts. That's really important to know. And yeah, like, you know, just be careful what questions you ask. If you don't want to know, like, if you feel like you know and you know that you have to report there's going to be more damage done, don't ask.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, that the mandates and all that's up to us. That seems like, well, it is the barriers in living. Like, you know, you go into prisons and then you get, judged and all that when you're in prisons, and this is what's happening to our women. And they're coming out to what? There's no hope. They're fighting to get their children back, if they get them back. There's no jobs, and it's just a big struggle for. So what do? They self-medicate. And we say, well, they're self-medicating because they're not well. Let's look at things that way. Don't punish them for it, support them and help them. But yeah, I sit there and I say, well, who's these people sitting up in the big feathery nest up in Canberra, the Avery? So who's sitting beside them making these policies that's supposed to be good for women in prisons or Aboriginal children or whatever? Who's sitting beside them as so that it's not just one person, one Anglo-Saxon or one I guess academic, making all those decisions? Is there anybody sitting beside him? Well, that's the law now, and we seem to be noticing that, especially with the Commissioner for Children and Young People. We say, well, what can you do? Well, my hands are tied. I know that these things are poverty, driven. I go, really? Well, I didn't know that. So it sort of brings up, you have to talk smart ass way to somebody that you think is supporting the cause, somebody who you think that is there to help you. So what if you're the Commissioner for Aboriginal young people and youth? What are you doing for them? What are you doing for them? He ended up, he was a down. He ended up leaving the job. Because those questions are not being asked to the people up there, even politicians, even the black politicians. Why should I vote for The Voice when you're supposed to be my voice now? You're supposed to be my voice up there in the past 20, 30 years. I'm not going to vote for any of you because you're not doing anything for us. You're not explaining why The Voice is. You're not explaining why treaty, and yet you want us to vote for you. Well, no, it's not like that. So that's hard. Just a bit of barriers, I guess, for us moving forward. I don't know whether you heard of spent sentences. That what we've come up with recently. Spent conviction. We had to bring that up through Wardungan because our elder was called a criminal when he was taken at 2 years old. So they had to create a record. The police had to make a record for him so they can take him legally. And he's 75, old Uncle Dad. And yeah, so we've taken it up with Wardungan. Wardungan's made legislation or applied for legislation, all that. Now it's called spent sentences. So they can't use your criminal record to say, well, you can't get this job. So leave it be. But that's not happening within some other government areas, such as child removal. Yeah.
For the spent conviction scheme, you have to wait 10 years until that.
Yeah.
So, in that 10-year period, there's limited options. And what I was saying about having those options to a flourishing life are really limited. So I don't know why they put that. Or
that's a
I don't
barrier
know
in
why they
itself.
put that 10 years in there.
Yeah, same thing as when
Yeah.
Aboriginal organisations get Section 18s, which makes the CEO responsible for a child. So beforehand, years ago, you used to be a ward of the state. Nowadays, if there's a Section 18 with a say back or say Gmail, whatever, you that child will be a ward of me, the CEO of Gmail, or the CEOs of others. But they're not allowed to make decisions without the department. So I said, well, that's 2 steps forward, 1 step back in self-determination. People are not seeing it. And yet he's us little old grandmothers telling them what to do, and it's all for the big mighty dollar, I suppose, because we can't just be grandmothers and do it. And we're making waves. And we're getting mums to have their babies. We're having we're we're getting children to have, access with mums in prison. They wouldn't allow it, you know. I said, well, you know, this is 2023. We still listen to you, tell us what to do. But, you know, that's me, I'm sarcastic sometimes. It's that way. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of systemic collusion, I reflect back on my experience when everything started to go south. I was working lots of jobs because my ex-partner had lost his job, and I was desperate not to have to live back with my parents because there were obviously some issues there. So I burnt out and I sent my then 18-month-old to his parents' house because I said, I can't look after her. I am so unwell. I can't get out of bed. I'm doing this for her best interest. And then they kept her. And I was like, dude, what? Well, why are you not letting me see my kid? And then they just kept her. And then he was trying to manipulate me with money. Well, you can see her if you pay that car loan. And I said, well, you can't use your child as like a financial hostage. That is wrong. And I guess not having experienced anything in the system, I was like, no, like I don't need to seek help. I'm going to do this by myself. I'm an independent woman. Like I have been a lone wolf my entire life. And then he went to the police and said, oh my God, she's harassing me. She is super dangerous. I know about her drug use, and they put an IVO on me. And then I didn't make it to court because I had a hysterical breakdown in the car park across the road. So they put a full IVO, no contact. And I went, hold on a second. I gave my daughter to someone to look after her family because I couldn't look after her. And now the law prevents me from seeing her after I acted in her best interest. What? And then I tried to seek help. Well, when I spoke to the cops, but they were like, oh, but you're the perpetrator. I was like, no, I'm not. Did you see these text messages? You know, and I buried the IVO after that spiraled me into like a deep drug addiction, because what mother can deal with having her baby taken away from her without any possibility of seeing her, with the possibility of going to prison if you even try, you know? So I tiptoed, and I was very intentional and very strategic about how I approached it. So I was like, I don't want to go to prison. And then I buried the IVO and I went through the processes. And then I tried to see her and he said, no. Well, you can see her with my parents. And I said, hell no. I am not going to sit there while your entire family intimidates me after keeping my child. And then he said, well, we can get a mediation service. So I said, sweet. I found him up. I said, I'll put him on the wait list. I need your consent. I'll pay for it all with all the money that I don't have. And he said, and he just kept, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. And then I got a call from the cops one day. Apparently I'd been harassing him and I'd breached the IVO, and I thought, no, I haven't. I am smart. I have been careful. I have not breached that IVO, but because I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm going to go to the police station and sort this out. I said bye to my sister and I said, I'll be back for lunch. It was like 10 a.m. on a Sunday. I'm going to go there. I'm going to sort it out. The cops need to talk to me. And I went there and they never let me out. And I went, what the fuck? And they go, and this is my favorite part, 2 male police officers. And they go, well, you threatened him. And I said, no, I didn't. He has not let me see my child. It's been like 5 months. I've been careful. I said, if you don't let me see her, I'm going to bring you to court. And that's what they did me on. They said that was harassment and systemic collusion, because I guarantee you, if there was even one female police officer there, they would have said, dude, that's not harassment. That is just a mother trying to see her child. And I mean, I'm not going to explicitly say anything, but I know there is a bit of a stereotype of male police officers being domestic violence offenders themselves. Yeah, that's what did me. And it makes me so angry, because how in any of that is that fair? How is that fair? And that is just like systemic collusion. If I had gone to the cops first, they would have been fine and they would have said, oh, that's actually wrong. Like, yeah, no shit, it's wrong. But because he went and he said, well, she's mentally unstable, like she doesn't have a place to live, you know, oh, but she dabbles in drugs. Like, look at my family. My family's well adjusted, like she doesn't talk to her parents, but that's not the point. You tore a baby away from its mother for 2 years and look at all that damage you've done. And it's just the system for some, I mean, we know it's just broken, but it just constantly misidentifies women as the perpetrator because, I mean, women are smart, but men are usually the ones that get sneaky and start all of that manipulation and because they want that control. And then you just end up with this whole problem and it doesn't stop.
I'm seeing and lost in everyone else's, stories. Oh, where do I start? There's so many different areas where I could go, I guess, but, I just want to say it's exhausting. First of all, it is exhausting and it's like sometimes, you know, and I hate, it sounds like I'm paranoid, but it's not that. It's like, it's out to like beat you down sometimes. Like, I just feel like I'm so tired of battling this system, of them coming in saying, okay, you're a drug user. Okay, I do clean screens. Oh, okay, maybe you're not using drugs. Okay, you've been in a domestic violence relationship and that person's around again or they're out of prison. So if you don't go to the hotel tonight and work out other arrangements or go to the police and make a restraining order against this person, we're going to remove your child. And it's just this constant battle. And I'm like, I'm working, I'm trying to do the right thing. And, you know, even just upping the child out of like when they come home from school and having to up them out of their environment and their routine and their puppy and their ferrets. And having to take them to the hotel for the night is traumatic. And it's redoing this whole thing that I'm trying so hard and got clean and all this so that she didn't have to go through this system bullshit. And then they're just forcing it upon and they don't really care. They're just standing there smiling, going, okay, go pack your bags. And I refuse to go to the police because the point is that it's more unsafe for me to go to the police because one of my history, I get looked down upon automatically. And secondly, it then tells them where I'm living again, which they can find out anyway. That sounds really silly, but it's just making me well known that I'm in that area. And I don't need that, you know, at all. And I lost the train of what I was saying, but anyway, it's just, so there's that happened like a couple of days ago. So that's been going on. And then the last time I had child services involved, because they seem to be one of the biggest perpetrators, especially in my history and life, was like a similar situation where they came in and made me leave the house. And it's just, you know, it's just ridiculous. And then I'm driving to pick up my daughter from school and then I get a phone call. It's like, you need to go and do a drug screen now, even though I'd already done 3 clean ones. Now before 4 o'clock, and it was like 3:15, and before 4 o'clock, otherwise if you don't do it, we'll class it as a dirty and your child will be removed. And I've had clean neurons, Nelly had a car accident, and it's just all this and crap. And that all the reason they got involved that time was because I reached out for support because I felt like I was going to relapse. I've been clean 14 years, but I was feeling like I had a lot going on in my life. My ex had just been like stuff going on with my ex, and there was abuse and stuff like that. And I just needed some support. And that was what I said to them. Now I know better, like, and I warn people against saying that, which is a concern in itself, because then people are going to be using on their own in the house without reaching out with children, like with children at school, don't get me, you know, I'm sure, you know, but they're going to be using, and they're not going to reach out for anything. Like, they're not going to reach out for if their partner's being financially abusive, anything, because especially if they're being, like, full stop, but especially if they're being criminalised and have a drug history, and all this other stuff, because they're too fearful that they're going to come in and remove their children. For no valid reason, like the child's, being, and anyone can say, oh, the child's fed, but the child is being well looked after. And also something I want to say, and I don't know that it's really meant for this spot, but I'm not necessarily talking about myself, I'm talking about other people. People can drug use and still be really good parents. It doesn't mean because you're a drug user that you're a shit parent and that you can't look after your kids.
I think with the wine bottle.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you can, and if you've got the money, like if you're a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, what are you doing? Yeah, like, well, this is it, and how much ice and coke are they having, off their freaking buckybees freaking.
Because they got
thing.
money.
Well, it doesn't matter because they can afford it, and and the abuse is going on inside the house. I'm sure DHS don't rock up at their door and say, okay, get your bags packed, you're going to a hotel for the night.
Yep.
I'm sure I'd be very, very surprised. I doubt it altogether. But, somebody that's been, or women that have, or men, what have you, that have been through the system, been in prison, are struggling, but still maintaining, bingo, bango. You have one, even smoke pot or whatever it is, having Valium in your system that you shouldn't have in there. And we're removing the child that you've looked after for 6 months, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, even though schools, creches, everything's saying this kid's fine. They come to school, they're perfect, nothing's wrong, and it'll hurt the child more. But they don't give a shit. It's just like, nah, we're just going to tick the box.
Who the hell is, why the hell are they concerned?
Well, this
No.
is it, exactly. And not to ask the child, and just lastly, before going anymore, and not to speak too much to this thing, but my daughter suffers anxiety like I did as a child. And verges on selective mutism, so she won't talk to strangers. Nene knows her, and she spoke to names and stuff, but she does. So when these pricks come in, talking DHS come in, and want to have a conversation with her, I'm like, well, I'll sit there, whatever. And they're like, no, she's old enough now. We can have this conversation with her. And even the teacher, principal said, no, look, let's not do this, but they've got to do what they've got to do. And because she wouldn't talk to them, they then rang the school and said, is this child okay? Is she being abused? Have you noticed any bruises? And I told them prior to this that she's got anxiety. And you've upset her throughout her life.
Her trust.
Well,
Why
this
would she talk to
exactly.
them?
It's this
Protecting
stranger.
herself.
And probably not protect. I hate to say because she's got no reason to protect, but kids protect their parents. They're scared because they're not stupid. They know who these people are. And it's so I just, for all the women, people struggling with systems, my heart's with you guys because it's just a fucking battle. It's such a battle, and I'm tired. I really am. And I'm trying. I'm a lot of steps ahead of a lot of women. But the women that are still using and still struggling, I'm still with them because they can still parent. They can still, they just need support, but they can't get any fucking support from these systems because they get in trouble and they come in and remove their kids. So what the hell are they meant to do? And then they end up struggling and things get worse and the addiction gets worse. And then, they end up losing their kids when if we could have supported them earlier and put some things in place without colluding with police and everyone else, it would never have got to that situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I think what I'm hearing most of all is that, and I hate the language perpetrator, but perpetrators of violence are the systems. Like, when we're looking at who's actually enacting violence, it's the systems more, like I was saying before, that I was able to do a really meticulous risk management strategy with the person that was using violence against me. I had no ability to do that with the system. No ability. And I think it's also really strategically named family violence or domestic violence because it doesn't include all violence and all abuse, and prevents them from, having to look at all the violence that they are exhibiting. And I just want to mention too, thanks to all of the women with the children that have shared up here, but we're not just talking about women and kids, we're talking about all people. And in that conversation is also the people that are using violence. Like the system doesn't work for them either. It doesn't give them opportunities to heal or recover or grow. They have a lot of people that are using violence, have experienced violence. And when they go through the systems, they experience exactly the same violence as the people that are victims. So I just want to point that out. Joe, did you want to say anything to it as well? Yeah.
Just quickly, I think like as I've been listening to people and thinking about like my own recent experiences as well, I feel like something that is probably super useful for people who work in these kinds of sectors to do. So like one example that I think is like a good example is like, so I'm currently on a community corrections order. So I just had my sentencing hearing a couple of weeks ago and I got sentenced to a 3-year community corrections order. So only 15% of the people with my charges actually don't get a custodial sentence. So I was like very lucky to be able to avoid prison. Even though I did spend like 3 weeks in remand, but I didn't get sentenced. And I feel like the only reason that that occurred was because I was like actively being a private investigator into my own, like speaking of PhDs, I feel like I have a PhD of my whole life history and my own trauma. And like within that, getting freedom of information requests from this hospital, that hospital, this hospital, right? Finding a GP that was like an abolitionist GP, right? Finding out information from my lawyer about the like kind of privilege between GPs and clients. So it's like identifying those areas of safety within the system, like for people who are criminalized to know that, like to know that actually what occurs between you and your GP is highly privileged and near impossible for any kind of like legal, like the prosecution or whatever to actually gain access to you and your GP specifically. So like information like that for criminalized people to know, I think is like incredibly important, because I think we we go through that whole process for highly paranoid, highly irrational, doing all sorts of crazy things because we don't know, like actually, oh, if I talk to this person, is it safe? Will they snitch on me? What are the police powers? What are the prosecution powers? How does the legal system even fucking work? And most lawyers are horrible at explaining it to people. Like they make absolutely no effort in actually thinking from the perspective of their client, like what would it feel like to be in that experience? You know, like what information would I be needing to give to this person in order for them to feel safe and secure and not paranoid? Like for ages, I wasn't talking about anything on my phone, you know? And my lawyer was like, it's near impossible that they would be putting the resources into tapping your phone. Like you need to chill out, you know what I mean? But like these kinds of things, I think are super important for people who are like going through the court system to actually be aware of, because then it allows you to be your own advocate, which through the whole experience, I feel like, you know, like Nina said, like actually what I come to realize is that, you know, GPs, lawyers, all these people, they're never going to be able to defend you appropriately. Like it's actually all up to you. It's about like the story, the narrative that you construct, the detective work that you do. And it's really just about giving criminalized people the resources and infrastructure, capacity, the knowledge, the confidence to do it themselves, not actually to do it for them or to like, it's just like giving them the information so that they are able to do it themselves, because no one else will do it for you. Everyone is overworked, overstretched. Like no matter how much money you pour into it, no lawyer, no social worker, no case manager is going to actually have the time to support you properly, because it requires like 10 times the amount of time that people are actually able to put into it. So yeah, it really comes down to yourself, and it comes down to your community and your friends, which is why I feel like I was super privileged to come from an abolitionist community, because as soon as I was criminalized, like I had shit tons of people to support me. And that's not the case for most people. Most people have literally no one. So I think that's why abolition is also incredibly important, to spread that word, because if you spread abolition and you convince people and you show people why the system actually causes more violence than it prevents, and you actually are able to get through to people, then when this shit goes down and people get criminalized and they get arrested and they get charged for shit, then people will be there to support, right? In the ways that we need people to do, because it's never going to happen through the sector. It's never going to happen through the legal industry, and it's never going to come from the system and the institutions. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jazz. It makes me think of all those new slogans too that are floating around, like, trauma informed, self-determination, children in their own right. And it's like, feeding in, like, if those slogans actually meant something, it's all of what Jazz was just talking about. Like, if you're trauma informed, you understand what I've been through and you're going to support me to get through it. Or like, if you understand self-determination, you're going to ask me what I am determined to do, and you're going to provide me with solutions and support in order to be able to go on that trajectory. And children, victims in their own right, what a crock of shit. Like, if they were actually victims, they would be kept with the people that are protecting them. Male or female, you got to keep these families together. It's intergenerational trauma. Justin, I don't think you knew the question, but the next question was, what could a worker do better to support you? So, does anyone want to answer that?
I could jump in because it's like so many thoughts about all of the content. I feel like we could be here all day. But yeah, I also want to acknowledge that in all sectors, but particularly the family violence sector, the number of people who are drawn to that work because they themselves are survivors is just astronomical. And the knots that we contort ourselves into to pretend that we're not, and to like not have our professionalism, however problematic that is, undermined, and to still be taken seriously, and the weird dissonance that creates between us and the people that, again, we're supposed to be allied with, is ridiculous and exhausting and unnecessary. We're supposed to be activists. We're supposed to be allies. The system continues to make itself so wide open for systemic collusion and abuse. And, for so many of the people that I've engaged with in developing this resource and doing other work, like interpersonal harm and violence is like known and predictable and in front of you, and something that, as Nina was saying, you can do your own risk management around. It can't sweep in like the state and completely take away your autonomy. It can't lock you up. It can't remove your kids right now. It can't dog you for years and years and years and years with records and mandatory reports that hang around your neck like a millstone. Like, the state has so much power and authority. And so people will often, want to deal with the harm that they're experiencing in their own way. And I think, as if there's one thing we can do as individual workers, is to stand up and, resist the systemic harm and abuse so that people can get on with carving their own path and, doing their own healing and recovery and resisting in their own way with the allyship of their community. We're part of the system, and the least we can do is to try and take some ownership of that in a way that mitigates that systemic harm, by making information available, by dignifying people's experience, by refusing to report on them and become part of the problem. So yeah, I think if there's this many people here today and however many people online, that's a pretty massive think tank to start generating some concrete strategies and sharing information that it could actually restore some of that power where it belongs. So yeah.
Thank you. I'll just add maybe a little bit. I think one way is service providers of yes. Okay, that one. I think the best way, yeah, thanks. Okay. Best way you can kind of support someone, especially with some oh, that's, yeah, cool. Especially with people that have been seriously hurt by the system, had their kids taken, had their ex-partners lie and manipulate the system to, and cause whatever dramas they may have caused. I think when you're working with someone like that, who has experienced things like that, listening, not trying to kind of put in your own views and opinions on a situation because it's not your situation. Listen to them, ask what you can do, how you can help, and what they need from you to have a good working relationship. I know when I was working at Flat Out, one of the intake questions that I would ask people on intake is, what can we do to support you? What do you need from us to support you and have a good working relationship? And I found every time I asked somebody that question, they did not know how to answer it.
Say that.
Yeah,
I hate that question.
yeah,
I don't know what to answer. I've never known.
yeah. Every time I asked that question, the person's face was just like, oh, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, and I said, well, it could be anything. You know, do you want us to text you before we call? Anything you can think of that would help this be a really good working relationship, you tell us and we will make it happen. And I think, yeah, and a lot of the time they couldn't answer it. And I said, okay, that's all right. You have to think about it next time we speak. I'll ask you again. And yeah, just, it really upset me that people didn't know how to answer this question because they had never had a good working relationship. If you fuck up and, you know, say something that hurts their feelings or accidentally, like I know sometimes if you're talking to another service provider, you're in conversation and something will come up, and when the person you're supporting has found out that you've mentioned this thing, they get super angry at you because you've broken their trust. Admit you screwed up, apologize for it, and don't do it again. Yeah, I think that's it.
We've found that in some cases, just ask that question, what can we do for you? It draws out the thing where it's, okay, a lot of people know what they don't want,
Yes.
not what they want.
Yep.
So you can be aware of that and do what you've done. Is talk and give them options of what we can provide, you know, that kind of stuff.
I'm just conscious of the time. We did start a little bit late, so we might just drag on a little bit longer. But I would like to really highlight that with sharing lived experience of criminalisation does come a risk. So like, you know, I think the women that are sitting here with me today have shown utmost resilience and strength throughout their whole life, but also in just sitting here today and sharing their stories. And would like to give them a massive round of applause. Karen, did you want to say a few words as well?
If I can get them out after that. No, I'm all right here, I reckon. First of all,
I think the onliners can see you there though.
then I'll come up with you. I'm Karen. I'm the EO at Flat Out. We live here on the second floor. I'd like to acknowledge that this building used to house a hospital, which was not always open in the same way to everybody. And there was a welcome to country given here a couple of weeks ago where an Aboriginal woman who was born here said that she was born on the balcony because her mother was not allowed to go on the ward. And there's lots of feelings around this building because of the name of it as well, the Queen Victoria Women's Centre. So I'd like to acknowledge that we recognise that that can make it a really uncomfortable place for folks, and apologise that we haven't been able to make a change, but we're talking to the trust about whether in the process of treaty, the legislation that set up the trust and named the building can do something better in terms of the way that we are naming the buildings that we're trying to use for transformative purposes. And we are trying to use this for transformative purposes, as you all are today. Really like to thank you for coming along. I'd like to recognise the workers of Flat Out. There's a couple of them standing up there at the back, Amy and Jazz. And wrangling the IT is Kate. Beck here in the front row. Our ex-workers who are never ex, you don't ever leave Flat Out, or there's always a relationship. Recognise the past and present workers and supporters and volunteers of Flat Out, which is an amazing organisation. I've been working here for 18 months. I've been on the board for a few years, but we've been going for 35 years. And we came out of the sort of feminist movement against the terrible treatment of women in prisons back in the 1980s, when women were being put in jaika and separated from their children. I mean, the incredible thing is that today that's happening on an even more massive scale. We got up to nearly 600 women in Dame Phyllis Frost before COVID. We're back down to 300 odd now. And congratulations to everyone, particularly the leadership from the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service and other Aboriginal organisations on the campaign to change the bail laws, which are already having a bit of an impact. But we need to push that so that we can get more people out. But the number of folks going in on a churn 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks on remand is absolutely scandalous in Victoria, and we've got so much more to do. And the numbers are having this impact. I really want to recognise Auntie Rio's work in Grandmothers Against Removals on the number of children who are being removed from parents because parents, and particularly mothers, are being imprisoned. And folks who've been listening to the Uruk Truth-Telling Commission have probably heard that, you know, in the last decade, it's tripled the number of young children being removed from Aboriginal mothers. And it is clear that part of that is related to the increasing rates of imprisonment on remand, the changes to the bail laws in 2018, the earlier changes to the bail laws, which made breach of bail a criminal offence back in 2015. And we have to recognise that it's also related to the changes to the family violence sector, which have introduced these levels of mandatory reporting to child protection and police on a level that is literally tearing young children away from their mothers at 3 times the rate that they were back when we started. Every time somebody gets an L17, for an Aboriginal woman who comes in seeking help from family violence and puts it on the top of the pile for the police or the top of the pile for child protection, that's another family at risk of separation. And people working in the sector know that we are encouraged to do that. It's blatant racism, but people talk about it as, oh, well, Aboriginal children are more vulnerable. And so therefore there has to be a report immediately to the police or child protection, and child protection or the police could be on the doorstep that day as a result of a report from an Orange Door or another agency. We need to be aware that these systems, which are supposedly for protection, can result in that situation. Sorry, I'm going on for too long, but I just wanted to finish by saying that it's not a comfortable place to be. Really, thank you all for being here and for participating online as well. It's not a comfortable place to be speaking these truths, and these people are incredibly courageous to be speaking these truths, and Flat Out is really proud to support them. If you're able to support Flat Out and Grandmothers Against Removals and the other grassroots community organisations that are made up of people with lived expertise, if you're in any position to help, please do, because we're always struggling. We've never got the resources that we need to provide either the individual support that we want to, or to bring out the issues that are coming from the people in the prisons and after prisons to the level of agencies, to talk to the Orange Doors, to get things on the public agenda, to do the media releases and the opinion pieces and the submissions to this inquiry or that inquiry. How do we do that when we are literally, less than 10 people, less than three part-time caseworkers, we're tiny. There's money floating around, for organisations that talk about people as offenders or forensic patients or all the other colluding words, but it's very hard to get the kind of funding that's needed to employ people like this who are real experts, real professionals, and have got the solutions. Thanks for coming.
So in conclusion to the event, I would like to take the opportunity to do a little bit of a call to action. Other than the postcards, don't forget about the postcards. I will post them. All you need to do is fill out the details. I'll post them for you. We know that there's a housing crisis in Victoria, and it's the worst that it's ever been. And with these limitations, criminalised survivors are often at the bottom of the barrel, and in many cases don't even bother to apply because of intentional organisational abandonment that occurs to push this cohort further and further into traumatic situations and recidivism. We desperately need homes to heal, and Australia's response to family violence has also always relied on the justice system, which we know continues to fail as a solution. You cannot fix violence with violence. Pouring funding into heavier policing and building more prisons is not the answer. It's stealing money from our communities. In the last 5 years, Victoria has built 2,500 prisons and only 74 public houses. Our sector is feeling the repercussions. We are understaffed, under-resourced and overworked, and prisons and policing continue to see continues to steal the funding from our prisons. From our communities. So we demand to build homes, not prisons. And Jazz has come up with some really cool choreography. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get these tables off the stage and invite everyone up. And it's very easy. It's just build homes, not prisons. And so we can all come up and just do that little build homes, not prisons. Because I think with, you know, really heavy content, we want to end on a bit of a nicer note. And don't feel like you need to say it quietly. You can literally scream it. Build homes, not prisons. I think, are we facing that way? Okay. Yeah. The camera's just up on the wall there.
Camera.
Actions.
Go on the stage. Come on. Get out. That's more like it. You don't have to say. All right. Oh, I love that. Count it in.
Yeah, all right. Go on.
Oh, gee.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Not